and welcome back to day 2 of the Digital Transformation Summit presented by Internet and Mobile Association of India and Accenture. At this conference, as we all know, we are aiming to bring together industry experts, thought leaders, and transformation agents from a wide range of sectors to deliberate on technologies which are shaping the transformation of businesses today. We have received a brilliant response yesterday with over 1,500 delegates attending sessions across 3 panels. Before we start off with this session, I would like to quickly thank our partners, our title partner Accenture, our track partner Automation Anywhere, our cloud communication partner Route Mobile, and our bronze partner Tata Teleservices. Let us quickly deep dive into our next session. This session is a panel discussion on the topic evolving aspects of gig economy from the lens of labor laws. And for the same, I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists, our moderator, Mr. Pranjal Sharma, author, India Automated, Ms. Pooja Prabhakar, Managing Partner and CEO, BCP Associates LLP, Mr. Ganesh Kollegal Nanjundaswamy, AVP Government Affairs, Swiggy, Mr. Rajeev Aggarwal, Head of Public Policy, Uber. We welcome all of you. I would now hand over the session to Pranjal for the further. Thank you.
Thank you, Garma, and thanks to IAMAI for inviting all of us. We have 30 minutes and we have a very important set of speakers who will speak from their experience. And the question is very simple. What do the new labor laws mean for the gig economy? How can technology be deployed to make sure that two critical fronts for the gig economy? One, about taking care of the service providers are taken care of. How are they taken care of in every aspect of their work life? And second is, of course, how the consumers who are the recipients of the delivery of services are also protected, and they can also see some transparency and accountability in the services delivered to them through the new business models which are emerging. So I'll kick off straight away by requesting Pooja to give us a bit of a context. Pooja, if you can help all of us, including the audience, understand what are the key points of the new labor code which have an impact on the gig economy.
Thanks, Pranjal, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, IAMAI, for giving this opportunity for us to come together and discuss. So, as most of you know, we have about 200 million gig workers the world over, and in India, recent industry reports indicate that they have the potential to serve up to 90 million jobs and contribute an additional 1.25% to India's GDP in the long run. However, in the present context, from a labor law perspective, though, these workers are not currently covered under any legislation or a formal legal framework. A gig worker now is purely governed by the contractual obligations between the individual and the organizations. However, as most of you may know, we are on the verge of sweeping labor law reforms in our country, something that is much awaited, and perhaps the scale of which most of us may not see again in our working lifetimes. We are looking at huge reforms that have been awaited for many decades now. India is amalgamating about 29 labor legislations into 4 labor codes that is waiting to be notified. As we all know, it was supposed to be effective April 1st, but we have deferred it. And one of these codes, the Social Security Code, which came out in September of last year, 2020, has separately recognized gig and platform workers. So for the first time in our country, we have legislated on and legally recognized this class of workers, obviously as a result of the recent trends in digital transformation, something that has accelerated the growth of this species. Now, gig workers is not new to our economy. We've always had them. Right now, they are more structured and they are more visible, due to the various platforms, the digital platforms that we have. And this is certainly a very welcome move, a progressive one at that, for sure. There are many other countries and geographies, as we know, who have formal legal frameworks. And once this comes into effect, our codes, we will definitely be on that bandwagon. So as Pranjal said, to give a little bit of context about the Social Security Code in the context of gig and platform workers. Now, the code very clearly defines gig workers and accords them social security benefits like healthcare, ESI, PF, etc. It defines a gig worker as a person who performs work and earns from such a work arrangement outside of the traditional employer-employee relationship. It further categorizes and defines a platform worker as one who undertakes such work, but through an online platform. Now, the code, what it has done is it has provided for the constitution of a National Social Security Board that is going to be charged with the responsibility of framing and monitoring social welfare schemes for this class of workers. It provides for registration of gig workers. The gig workers will need to register themselves. And it provides for aggregators, some of you who are here online here today, to contribute to this fund. And it has also defined parameters for the same, about 1 to 2% of the annual turnover of the aggregator, but not exceeding 5% of what is paid to gig or platform workers. Of course, these are the rules that are out now. We are awaiting the rules to be notified. We will have to see what it is going to be in its final form. But till that point in time, this is the clarity that we have, and we are hoping that this does get implemented sometime soon. So that's the context. Pranjal, back to you.
Thanks, Pooja. So, Ganesh, this is the key thing for a company like yours, Swiggy, which has several thousand. I don't know the latest numbers of delivery agents you have, but it is very important, therefore, that the organization, your own company, has to perhaps relook at the systems that you have. How is your company approaching the labor court? What kind of preparation do you have you undertaken for this?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, IMI. And it's wonderful to be here amongst a very esteemed colleagues, and then share my perspective. To begin with, most of the things, or all the things I'd be saying, is from me as an observer of the gig economy and the platform economy, and some contextual with respect to the work that I do also. So to answer Pranjal's question, I would just like to build a context around it, some of which has been shared by Pooja. Gig and platform economy is very critical to a large workforce-based economy like India. Traditionally, the aspiration in terms of employment has been to have a permanent or a steady job. That's what has been inculcated into us right from the time we study. But the millions of people who are coming out of the colleges, universities, and various other vocational courses, they need to be employed. So the platforms and the gig employers offer this opportunity, and this is very critical. Otherwise, lack of employment can lead to very severe social cohesion issues. So from that perspective, I think gig or platform economy employment opportunities are very critical for a country like India. And taking off from where Pooja said, the Social Security Code, the National Social Security Code that has been passed by the Parliament, and now it's in the final stages of the rules to be promulgated, is a very forward-looking and a very path-breaking kind of a legislation and the rules, which not only defines both the gig as well as the platform worker, it also creates an opportunity for them to have access to social security benefits, which is very critical. And this will go a long way in terms of fulfilling many of the people's aspirations in terms of being part of this workforce, at the same time getting the benefits of it. And then since many of us or many of the observers say that this is a transitional kind of a work arrangement, so this will help legitimizing and then fulfilling their aspirations and their needs to a large extent. We, as employing a couple of lakhs of gig force, we and then many of the platforms have social security benefits like accident cover, health insurance, and then now in the COVID pandemic, we have a lot of initiatives where online support in terms of COVID management, doctor advice, and then getting them access to medical facilities for the gig and the platform workers as well as their families. Plus, if they are actually down with COVID, we give them minimum guarantee, that also the kind of the compensation that they would earn if they were working, since they're convalescing from COVID. So these already many of these social security benefits are in place, but the extension of that in a very formal structure by the government to the National Social Security Board is a very critical element. And this is actually, I can say with my experience, since I'm interacting with various other platforms and across the world, and they're looking forward to India's National Social Security Code, and then they are doing advocacy in their respective regions and then with their government to take a cue from this legislation, which is like unique and then probably one of its kind in the world, which is like which makes it like a beacon for the rest of the world. These are my thoughts. Thank you.
To Ganesh, we'll come back, and there's a lot to unpack as well over here. But Rajeev, coming to you and building on what Pooja and Ganesh said, if we look at a typical employee in an organized sector, in an organization, if we have to look at his or her, working conditions, his welfare, there are three parts to it. One is, of course, the working conditions. How do they work? So, from safety in a workplace, whether white collar or blue collar. Second, of course, is the welfare and support for medical and various other issues. And third is the compensation, minimum wage, etc., which are there for, again, white and blue collar workers. Now, when we look at the gig economy, how do you see these three parts playing out together? Because while there's a reference to social welfare, one concern is about the working conditions, because that's something which in a gig economy is difficult for an organization or a platform to control. How does one approach these challenges?
Yeah, thanks for that, Pranjal. So it's it's a pretty interesting thing that you've asked. Now, look at it from the formal economy point of view, an industry, a manufacturing unit. So it's easier said than done. Even the safety conditions out there, or the way those have to be maintained, and you make sure that things are the best possible. It's not that easy. And out here, what we are looking at is people who are working in very different circumstances. So they are not really working in a controlled atmosphere like an industry or a fixed unit. Like in the case of Ganesh, there would be delivery guys who would be, working all over the city. And similarly, in our case, in the ride-sharing industry, the gig workers would be working on the road. So while they would be only limited so to say, concerns that we could address in terms of the working conditions on the road, that's not really in our purview. But yes, there is a lot that we can do to make sure that we provide for them and we make sure that there are sufficient safety nets out there. So it could be on-trip insurance, it could be making sure that there are safety features available with them, not only physically, but also technology, allows us to provide them enough. So that's one. Two, if you were to look at, in terms of wages, etc., also consider that today, if there is a formal employment, then while there's very limited flexibility, so the timings are fixed, you have to be there at a certain time, then, your entire day is booked. You can't do anything else. For instance, if you have some spare time or you want to do something else, you don't have that flexibility. Plus, you are tied to a particular place, to a particular, if I might say so, in terms of educational requirements, etc. The gig economy allows you to democratize all that. So where if you have a couple of hours spare, you can actually use those spare hours to enhance your earning. The use of online platforms, the use of digital aggregators allows you to, to make it agnostic of caste, creed, your gender, and you can really provide for all that through the use of technology. So from that point of view, the gig economy provides for flexibility, which goes beyond the things that we could have imagined earlier, and that for me is something that is really critical from the point of view of the gig economy.
Rajiv, I'll stay with you for a minute. You mentioned that about people have a few hours to spare, and I think Uber launched with that concept, right? Where you said that anybody who had an asset which was perhaps not being utilized, and they also had time, they could utilize that vehicle for sharing. But in most of the world, that's now how it is. It is today a completely different model where an individual seeking to earn a livelihood has to invest in a vehicle either through his or her own investment or through perhaps loan and capital provided by the rideshare company. And therefore, the fundamental construct of that platform collaboration changes, because here you're looking at, it's closer to the retail franchise model where a retailer, for example, invests in an outlet, in a showroom, etc., and then earns a certain revenue out of whatever activity happens. So the construct has changed from what you're saying, isn't it?
So I would like to paraphrase this in two bits. One is, countries like the US, etc., where you have a P2P model where you could be earning as a professor and yet drive an Uber for a couple of hours. Now, that is something which has to do with the regulatory system mechanism in a particular country. As we know, in India and most of the Asian countries, that is not allowed. And for rightly so, there are reasons behind having a separate commercial vehicle ecosystem totally. So each country, each region has its own way of looking at things. So in the Western world, where you do have a P2P kind of model, there you're really not using, you're buying a vehicle only for the sake of driving on Uber. You would be doing something else and in your spare time looking at this. In India and in a few other countries where it's a full-time kind of engagement, even there, this does provide you flexibility. Today, you might be driving on Uber. Tomorrow, you go on Ola. You might want to do something with Swiggy. Might want to do something with Amazon, and so you can really maximize your earnings, keeping within those working hours and in the time of the month and otherwise that suits you as a as a worker vis-a-vis an employee. So that is something which this has definitely brought in. I'm not even getting into the comfort that it brings to the riders, the overall enhanced utilization of dead assets. A private vehicle is utilized maybe 4% of the time only. So here you're definitely utilizing private vehicles much more than, so in terms of a national waste, it's something which is taken care of. But I would like to specifically point out something out here which goes beyond this. And this is something that is born out of studies from the World Bank, etc. The earnings of women, can really go up if they are able to move, let's say, 5 kilometers from their home. And with all humility, if I might say so, and from seeing things in the villages, etc. So let's take the classic case. I'm not even looking at any social, so to say, disruptions out here. But even if you have a woman who is working at home, who is taking care of everything, and if she has 3 hours spare at home in the afternoon, and she wants to utilize that for something, it could be, let's say, just stitching something. And if she gets a low-cost product, a motor product, let's say a two-wheeler ride, and she can take her business, say, within 5 kilometers to the nearby city or to the nearby town and is able to commute, it certainly enhances her earning capacity. It empowers her. And this is only a stepping stone to move ahead beyond just those 2 or 3 hours. So it really helps break these societal kind of ceilings and these kind of bottlenecks that exist, whereby ride sharing or any such aggregator or the gig economy allows people not only to earn but also to expand their earning capacity by using these services. So it cuts both ways, and that for me is the most exciting part, where we are seeing women take to ride sharing as customers, not necessarily as drivers only, but as customers also. And
that's a great point, Rajeev. So I want to bring in Pooja here because there is a very strong element. I remember, and I'm sure all of you remember, when BPO industry began in India, there was a lot of opposition saying that we're just converting people into coolies and they're doing nothing and it's really dull work. But the fact is that it did empower a generation and more of people to learn and grow up the value chain. And I think that's something which the gig economy can also do. And it took a long while even for BPO industry to sort of settle into a kind of comfort level where there was balance between the needs of the employees and the organization. And this is what I want to come into to discuss with you, Pooja. I think one concern or a challenge today is that the equation between an individual service provider on the platform and the organization is probably not on equal terms, and there is a lot of concern that one individual has to just accept whatever the contract and agreement says, whether it is 30% of the revenue going to the platform provider, or the working hours, or the if there is a loan, then the deduction of that equated monthly income. So there is a concern that perhaps there needs to be a revision under maybe a law or regulatory system to look at those individual contracts as well. How does the new labor code look at this?
Well, from a labor code perspective, I don't think it has contemplated this aspect specifically, as opposed to looking at the broader social security benefit that it has accorded, like we said. So, based on what Rajeev said and what you said, yes, for this class of workers, where flexibility takes center stage, certain safeguards may not be available. And also, a lot of these, as you rightly said, is they are individual independent workers, so they may or may not have the ability to come together, pool in their thoughts, think through something and see what it is that they can ask. But otherwise, if you can closely look at it, then yes, certain changes can be made to the contracts that the individuals are executing today with any of the aggregators. But even then, I would still say this is some kind of a semi-formal setup, where there is an aggregator, an organization that truly cares about its employees, not employees, but it's gig workers. So as Ganesh said, and as Rajeev said, they are getting a lot of benefits today to these workers, and overall they may have a better work condition, work environment, if you will. But if you take it one step beyond, so something that has still not yet been digitized. For instance, we used to have this concept of gig workers before as well. What about the home-based workers, like Rajiv was alluding towards, maybe people who do embroidery? What about the agarbatti rollers? All these were also out workers, so they probably did not have as much available to them in terms of asking for some safeguards, asking for some benefits through the contract itself. But otherwise, I think at an individual capacity, this is available, and some amount of bargaining power is there with them.
Would you agree, Ganesh? Do you think there is bargaining power between an individual service provider and the platform today, or do you think that's going to evolve as well?
I think the bargaining power is available. If you look at taking just what Pooja said, I definitely see that the kind of benefits for this category of workers has enhanced quite a lot. So plus the fungibility in terms of the ability to offer the service itself gives them that much more bargaining power. Plus the other thing you mentioned about minimum wage, most or for the kind of number of hours they put in, they are way beyond the minimum wage that is stipulated for that category. And plus the ability to basically work across platforms gives them that bargaining power, whereas the categories that you cited below, like the agarbatti roller, etc., they did not have this. Whereas like Rajeev also told, he could work half the day in one platform, then move to another platform, maximize his time, maximize his earning ability, etc. So there definitely is available the bargaining power. Plus, if you add this dimension of the social security benefits, he is that much more, it's rounded in terms of what he gets. And of course, and I would like to add a couple of things that's actually coming in. A lot of the platforms, including mine, they are actually the people who are tenured, they are offering mentored services to the people who are coming in, so that way they pass on the knowledge. Plus there are efforts to see toward that their learning is augmented with support in terms of if they are taking any other supplementary educational elements, that also is coming in, and it's there in some way already. So this gives them plus one is the income earning ability, then the flexibility, plus the learning, plus getting mentored, and then preparing them for the future, if they want to choose some other career or something, which is actually very unique in this space. I'm sure Rajiv and Pooja would agree with me on this. Thank you.
Well, I'll stay with you, Ganesh. That's a great point. I was going to come to this point of skilling and training as well. But let's say when you have 200,000 people working with you, Ganesh, it can't be easy to make sure that they are upskilled and trained, even for the basic services that they are provided. Again, do you use technology for ensuring that they do it? Can you sort of help us understand that?
Correct. A lot of technology is used right from the time, when to make them learn about how to be a platform worker, to actually the opportunities available. Plus, every communication that comes to them is through technology. So they're very technology prepared. And then this whole skill enhancement in terms of being, technology savvy happens on one side, plus this mentorship, which is a very critical element, because people who already in the have spent certain amount of time, when they pass on the knowledge as to how they could maximize their time, then maximize their income earning ability, etc., there comes in. And then plus if you add, if I was a gig worker, and then I came to the platform and said, look, I would like to take these courses, can I get some help? Those kind of elements are also coming in, and they've been put in place. And this gives that motivation to stay on that platform or in that kind of a income earning opportunity for that much more to get upskilled and then move on to something else which he or she may want to do. And plus women, a lot of women gig or platform workers are coming in, because it gives them that flexibility while they're tending to their home or their family. Plus when they have the spare time, they can come out and then earn at their own time, using their own time, and then whatever time is available, and then go back to whatever they were doing or whatever they want to do. These kind of opportunities are not there, in this structure in other, work areas or gig areas which Pooja was mentioning. That's the actually differentiator.
Rajeev, please come in on this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, some personal emergency also going on the side. But to your question, and where the social security code comes up for digital aggregators, Ganesh, keep me honest, is that way you're talking of?
Right. So I was asking two things. One is about skilling and training, because you also have lakhs of people who are affiliated with the ride-sharing industry, not just your company but Ola as well. So I think that's one challenge, and that's really where it's a combination of both taking care of their own their needs, and also making sure that the customer, who's in the end the service consumer, is also satisfied. What kind of efforts do you put in, or has there been a change since the company began operations in India? How has this entire skilling and training uh, paradigm changed and become better over the last few years?
Yeah, so I'll look at the training and skilling in three parts. One is obviously the technical part, which is in our case the driving skills. Now, obviously, a driving license, a registration certificate, etc., are mandatory, and they have to undergo the driving tests prescribed by these statutory bodies. This may not be true in all sectors. There may not be such strict laws and regulations like in our case, but for all driving, all the gig workers out there, platform workers who need to drive, that technical part is taken care of by the statutory bodies. The second is the digital, so to say, learning. Now that's something which Ganesh also would be doing. So do our teams, and that's something which surprisingly is a gap that is bridged quite nicely. It could be people who are coming from the rural areas. It could be people who are from different castes. They could be from any location within India, but they really pick it up very fast. So that covering that and bridging that digital divide has been something which has been a phenomenal success in terms of skilling and the upgradation across platforms. The third part, like in our case, where gender safety, there's a zero tolerance policy. I know we have had our share of wars, but that's something we are very clear about. So we've had training programs for drivers physically. One, yes, they were very good, successful. But ever since COVID hit us, we started looking at virtual training. Now, surprisingly, Pranjal, we thought that they would not really do well, because most of us would not really pay heed if it's just sitting in front of a laptop or a mobile and looking at something virtually. But surprisingly, the way drivers have taken to these virtual training programs, where not only have they come, they've brought their families also, their wives or daughters or someone else who attend these training programs. And the way they have got sensitized is, it's a revelation for us also. So the point is, people want to learn. They are willing to take it up. And if we just provide them the facility, they would more than willingly lap it up. And they understand the essence of why it is being taken up. So so from that point of view, yes, it's a constant struggle. We can't say that the work is done. Ganesh, you want to add something?
Yeah. Just taking on that point, when it spoke about rural people coming in, see, there are other things that's happening in the ecosystem, like, ability to take bikes on hire for a day or for a month, the ecosystem. That is also helping people who don't have an asset of their own. they can take a bike, for 10 days, 15 days, and then use this to, be part of the platform work. The way that whole thing is getting constructed, the opportunities are getting generated, which is a very critical thing. Otherwise, like I was saying about the social, issues that could come up, because these are there, he doesn't need to say, okay, I need money to buy a bike or something. I can go, take it from a bouncer or a BOGO or whatever, and then, do my work, earn my livelihood, and then, get on with life, and then students, a lot of students who during their, holidays, and then the days when they're not attending colleges or after colleges, are using these platforms to supplement their income, which is actually a wonderful thing. I remember when I was, in college, we used to have this earn while you learn kind of an ability. So, opportunity. So these kind of things enable those elements to come into your life and your work. Yeah, thanks.
That's true. I remember, I think I did some, I was a door-to-door salesman for a few weeks in my college breaks as well. So I learned a lot of things the hard way. But of course, I never got into sales later. I think because of that. Pooja, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so just picking up from what Rajeev said in terms of awareness and education, I think that's absolutely bang on. And also these platforms allow for such large reach. So one could be obviously from a business standpoint, that you make them aware, but otherwise larger social issues. For instance, now we have COVID. One of the biggest thing that's required right now is awareness. People in the outliers, people in rural areas. How is it that we can reach out to them and say, do not panic? So these become these huge channels of communication. And we have done a lot of training on prevention of sexual harassment for a variety of audiences. And the kind of e-content that's available today with gamification, with engagement, with interaction in various vernaculars, we do see this population just absorb it. They're like sponges, who can absorb. And as Rajeev said, it's so nice to see that, it's expanded to their larger family, which is what we typically encourage. We say, now if it's a factory and there are workers, for instance, and we say, please convey this message to the other members in your family so that they are safeguarded as well. So yes, empowerment, enhancement, enrichment, kind of providing livelihood, and a great channel, credible channel to get the larger message out there.
Pooja, I want to stay with you. We've discussed various aspects, but in terms of the code, there is a lot of discussion about light touch regulation now, and that's a global phrase which is being used, and even in the context of India. But I've always felt that the rules that apply in India don't really apply anywhere else in the world, because in terms of sheer scale, socioeconomic conditions. We cannot really say that anything that works in US and Europe or even other economies are likely to work over here. But what do you think are the best practices in your experience that could be applied in India for the gig economy workers to ensure that there is agility? We usually tend to have extremes in India. Either we have such strict labor laws that nobody will hire people or get them on contract, or we'll have such awful ignorance about labor laws that people get exploited anyway. So we it's very few people who can say that we are taking care of our workers. Maybe a dozen good corporate leaders in India. In your view, what could be the best balance? What are the best practices in terms of light touch regulation for gig economy, which is evolving so well and so fast that even the policymakers have to be on alert, and they can't assume that what they write today is going to be valid for the next 10 years?
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's a very great and relevant question, and it's not, limited just to the gig economy. So the light touch regulation, we are seeing that in our codes as well. So it provides for a lot of self-certification and self-declaration, and obviously leveraging technology to do this. So since there's a huge thrust towards digitization in the legal landscape itself, and especially here in India, it is a huge opportunity to leverage that. We have seen that happening in the tax regime. So when you digitize your entire compliance framework, so companies who need to comply, individuals who need to comply, and the oversight is also digital. You don't have the Inspector Raj anymore. People need not go and harass somebody on the ground. So then you can have e-notices that are being issued right now, and the framework provides for self-certification. So even if there's increased vigilance, prosecution, penalty, what have you, it can be handled through this. So we do have risk management, as in GRC platforms that are emerging with more and more capabilities. Beyond this, if you go beyond just legal compliance, we are seeing a lot of ESG coming in. So it's a lot of ethical business operations that we are seeing. So environmental, social, as well as governance. So with all of these trends emerging, I think the best practice, as we were discussing some time back as well, transparency, accountability, and compliance. I think these three would be the buzzwords, which we are seeing many organizations and companies across various sectors slowly warming up to this. And today in India, we do have a pretty well-established framework, which the codes are only going to strengthen.
Ganesh?
I agree with that. By and large, when the code came in, I think all the e-commerce platforms, everyone, welcomed that. And, having a structure also enables better compliance, rolling out better benefits to the gig force. And I'm sure, Rajeev would also agree here. And the other aspect I wanted to talk about was, the kind of work the platforms and the gig force have actually done during the pandemic. It's unimaginable, because with all the essentials being allowed to be delivered and the platforms reaching out to the citizens who are at home, it could be elderly, sick, people who are in isolation, etc. Imagine just we did not have this ecosystem during the pandemic, and then they were not able to reach out the daily essentials and the needs like food, etc. to them. It could have been, the situation could have been, it cannot be even imagined. So from that perspective, the wonderful work the gig force through the platforms they're doing in terms of reaching out this, it cannot be just, no words will actually,
True.
cover their
Ganesh, I
benefit.
completely agree. I think gig economy has kept us alive, and I'll come to Rajeev as soon as he's back. But Pooja, the concern is again about the agreements. Even people like us, when we look at the terms of use conditions for Android or iOS, for example, it is even best of lawyers can't figure out which way it is leaning towards. And therefore, because our dependence on the gig economy workers is going to grow exponentially in the coming years, it's all the more important for us to ensure that the contract, and not necessarily in the legal way, but the contract between a gig economy service provider, partner, as you may call it, and the platform and a company be as balanced as possible to ensure that there is both sides are taken care of. It should not be exploitative at all. And sometimes it's exploitative not because it is intended to be, but by because of various reasons it ends up being so. So sometimes the economy workers, whether they're on the road or at home, have to work maybe 24 hours to be able to earn what they think that they should be earning for the effort they're putting in. So how do you think this kind of balance can be done? Because we need to get this model done in the best way possible, because if our dependence goes up and few more lakhs of people join this economy, we cannot be experimenting for too long. We've got to get it right.
So I'm sure Rajeev or Ganesh can comment on this better, but in my personal view, it is awareness. Awareness is the answer. I probably see some social groups coming in here who can look at it from a neutral standpoint. So not from the perspective of an aggregator or a platform or from the individual, someone who can come in as a neutral third party who can take a look at this to see if that balance is truly achieved, and then obviously create awareness amongst these gig workers to let them know, see we cannot let it run wild. This has still got a framework. This has still got to be within the bounds of something, because as you rightly said, there are various reasons why certain clauses would be included in that. But as long as we can strike a fair balance and then be firm about it, I think the eyes of a neutral third party will be essential, and then awareness must be created amongst the larger population.
And I think this is why, Pooja, many countries and regulatory regimes within countries say that anybody who's in a gig economy should be seen as an employee by law, rather than a partner service provider. And I think that's not something India should go towards, but we need to also have a model which works. Rajeev, your thoughts on this?
Correct.
Yes, I would agree with Pooja. And frankly speaking, it's even for aggregators, there is just no way that a 24-hour working, for instance, can be acceptable in any way. It's just not a question of safety. It's also from good business practices. It's not a sustainable model. So business has to be sustainable. It has to be equitable for everyone. And when we're saying that they're partners, then they have to be partners not only in terms of providing rights or providing services or gigs, they also have to be partners in terms of taking business ahead. And so the good point, and this I must really commend the government of India for this, is that they have recognized that there is something different out there. From that traditional industrial revolution kind of factories of Manchester and otherwise. Now we are moving on to different modes of working. It's not just employment, it's actually working. And I really like the way, Pranjal, you had paraphrased it yesterday. So it's actually this working which we have to recognize. And there will be new models that will evolve. Today we are talking of the gig economy of digital aggregators on a platform. Tomorrow there might be something else. The law has to recognize that society will continuously evolve and keep on changing itself. That said, we cannot have a free for all, and absolutely aligned with Pooja on this. We need to have a structure, and that structure can only be provided by law, by statute, and that's where this code really comes in handy. And we've not only as Uber, but as the entire gig economy, all the aggregators, it's been something we have willingly said that yes, we would like to be part of this. We would like to make financial contributions for the social security, and knowing fully well that not everyone can provide for all partners out there for all times to come. So can we have a structure whereby through the government, through the amazing outreach of the government, we are able to provide for them, able to provide for their families? And that's something which we have, consciously, so to say, taken that responsibility onto ourselves. And there's no other way other than through the government, which can then be, a national neutral arbiter between different aggregators.
True. I think that's well said, Rajiv. And really, it's about livelihood, not employment, because generating livelihood opportunities, generating work opportunities is important, and employment in the classic sense, which is, in my view, an outdated concept. In any case, only 10% of our workforce in India is really in formal employment. Everybody else is really informally earning something or the other, and therefore the larger framework of the government's effort to bring people under the National Digital Health Mission, universal insurance, and the labor code should bring some level of safety net for others. We have a few minutes left. There's a question which has come up on the definition of a zero-hour contract. Now, can one of you explain what this means?
Can I add something to what Rajeev said, from his that perspective? See,
sure.
There are, like I was yesterday, we were talking, many of the earlier laws were B2B. Then there is a whole shift towards B2C. That's when the whole change in terms of the, reaching out to the customer happened. Similarly, the laws that were for the labor and employment was more, with the, like this smokestack chimney kind of an example I was giving. So now it's like a principle, the aggregated principle. So this is an evolution that's on, and then that will happen. And then as this gets matured, and then as more learnings come in, it's going to get better. And then definitely with the new code and all that coming in, it's going to make that much more better, bringing a structure to it. This is what is my thought on it.
So, Pranjal, I'll take the questions I see that have been put on the chat. First, future of gig economy, it is definitely there. You already said formal employment is only 10%. You have the unorganized sector. So this is somewhere between the two. So you're formalizing the payments, you're formalizing, so that they have bank accounts. There is a proper transparency in the way they're paid for their services, etc. And yet they retain the flexibility when, how, with whom they want to offer their services. The second, whether it is better for a country like India, I won't say yes or no. Systems evolve, laws evolve, society evolves. And depending on the needs of society, that's 5 or 10 years ago, maybe I would never have thought of ordering food from outside. Today, our children don't even think twice before ordering something from outside.
No, that's
So,
true. No, so that's not the
that,
question. I think whether it's good or
yeah,
not is not the issue. As long as people have livelihood, I think, and
yes.
it's a good form of livelihood, it's fine. The question is on 0-hour contract. What does it mean?
Yeah, the third is the 0-hour contract. Now, this is actually a term peculiar to UK, so not really very pertinent to India. So I really, I don't think it would be fair to really get into it. It's more a UK kind of term that's used. So where I can offer a contract where I'm not promising any hours, and the person who on the other end of the contract also doesn't promise to provide services for even a single minute. So it's a kind of a no SMA kind of contract, but not really material for India.
So I'm going to
Pooja,
close
I
this
mean, you
with
would be next.
I'm going to close this with one question to all three of you, and close it with forward-looking and something to look forward to kind of answer, which is that in your views, what do you think would be the one big shift that we will see in the gig economy? How will it shift in the next 3-4 years? We've already seen big changes so far. So I'll come to all three of you for a quick 30-second answer. Pooja, you first.
In my view, I think, flexibility is the central concept to this whole thing. It is very fundamental and integral to gig work. And, at the altar of regulation, we must not sacrifice flexibility. So like Ganesh said, like Rajeev said, we have seen this provide livelihood opportunities to a tremendous many. And we probably are still scratching the surface of this, because this needs to percolate down to the other, tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural areas, and things like that. So possibly in the near future, we will see the gig economy grow. And as long as we can ensure that there are the right safeguards with the right balances, I think this is something that is going to benefit many, many more people than what we had imagined.
So
And of
Pooja,
course,
you say
thanks to technology.
right, and as you say, so it's going to expand and grow to maybe many more layers and sections of our society and towns. Ganesh, your thought?
Taking from where Pooja said, flexibility and employment, generating huge amount of income earning opportunity, then going down, percolating to the much deeper ends of the society across the geography of this country. Another one big shift I see is EV. Having kind of zero emission deliveries that's going to come up in the next few years. That's going to be a big game changer, and that will spawn a new set of ecosystem for this whole gig activity. These are my thoughts.
And apart from the EV, and that's a great phrase you used, zero emission delivery. But does that include also drones?
It's still, compared to EV, drones is still even more nascent. So, and you have this controversial element that taking away livelihood opportunities. I don't want to get into drones.
No, but it's a add-on. It's a layer which comes over it. It's now you cannot have 20,000 drones all over the city. But I think in certain cases, I know that a country like Rwanda has experienced and done projects on using drones for medical supplies and blood
Yes.
samples, etc.
In
So
remote areas, in inaccessible areas, drones could be
exactly
something
for
that make a difference.
exactly. So Rajeev, one big thought in what could happen in the future.
Oh, I am pretty excited about the gig economy. It is the way forward. And I still feel we're still just barely scratching the surface. We have only reached out to a few major cities, tier 2, tier 3, maybe. The real thing will come when the rural area gets unlocked. And that potential is huge. The people in villages, their level of, I won't call it literacy, but education. It's not just mere literacy. They are very perceptible. They know, and they just need that opportunity for them to strike big. So that I feel the gig economy can really unlock the potential of the rural India also, and that's something for me which is the most satisfying parts of this.
Thank you,
One
Rajeev.
thing
I agree with you that that if we have the right kind of laws and regulation, then the gig economy can bring millions more into our economic and digital mainstream. So we have to end on this note. Thank you very much for joining us, for this session. I'm going to hand it over back to IAMI. Garima, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pranjal, and thank you to everybody for joining in today. We will be back with yet another exciting session shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thanks,
Stay
everyone.
safe. Thank you.